Zebulon Pike was an American brigadier general born in 1779, near Lamberton, New Jersey. However, he spent his youth in several U.S. military outposts across the Ohio and Illinois region. Considered the Northwest Territory of the United States at the time, Zebulon, at the age of 20, was commissioned as a second lieutenant of infantry, and later that year was promoted to a first lieutenant. He led 2 expeditions in 1805 and one immediately after returning in 1806. The first went north along the Mississippi River and north into Dakota. The second expedition went west into the southwest and Mexico region, displaying the imperialist and expansionist political views common in the 19th century United States. His expeditions, or invasions as some people would put it, led to a quick series of changes in the United States' political views as the people began to look west to colonize and inhabit, leading to the 1840s Manifest Destiny ideals. Pike died in 1813, a casualty of his own expansionist political following, the War of 1812, which arose from debates over American and British territory. Joseph Smith was the founder of Mormonism and the first religious leader of the Church of Latter-day Saints, and was born in 1805 in Sharon, Vermont. 1817, he moved with his family to New York. Smith had grown deeply interested in religion by 1820. During the Second Great Awakening, he had claimed that he had a vision of Jesus, an angel named Moroni, and God, which he later recounted to a priest who disregarded his allegations. In 1823, Smith was said to have been visited by the same angel who told him the location of the golden plates, which supposedly held the true contents of the original Bible and the religious history of the Native Americans. However, he could not retrieve them until 1827 with his wife, Emma Hale. By age 24, Smith published the Book of Mormon, which was said to be translated from the plates. Between 1827 and 1836, Smith traveled often, bringing Mormonism with him and attempting to convert people in Ohio, succeeding in only a few places, but rarely in between. In the mid-1830s, his following amassed to nearly 2,000 followers. However, he died in Nuevo, Illinois in 1844 from a series of fatal gunshots and falling from a 3-story building. Murdered for his religion, he left behind his 26,000 followers and went west into the Manifest Destiny movement. Smith's following was directly correlated with quick social changes in the 1840s of imperialism and westward expansion, and of religion and its fanaticism. This made it obvious from the Mormons purchasing and selling in Utah achieving their Zion at long last. Matthew Perry, born in 1794, was a Commodore in the United States Navy who commanded ships during the War of 1812 and the Mexican-American War. He personally led several expeditions to conquer or open regions for the United States, including the Florida Keys and Japan. Perry was a strong advocate for the modernizing of the United States Navy and subsequently of gunboat diplomacy, especially in the opening of Japan. In his first expedition, he used gunboat diplomacy to enter Japan outside of Nagasaki, which was the only city foreigners could visit at the time, and shot his guns with blanks to intimidate the Japanese. He quickly met with the Roju, an elder council of government in Japanese imperial politics, and presented a letter, not asking, however, telling Japan to open the country to Western trade, stating that he would return in a year for their answer. Afterwards, he left to chart East Asia and provide military advice for the United States government and protect their assets. After only half a year, false to his word, Perry returned to Japan with 10 fully armed ships and 1,600 men to receive the response of the Japanese government. A convention was held at Kanagawa, which lasted approximately a month and resulted in the opening of Japan. Perry returned to the United States a hero for the protection of U.S. imperialism. However, he died in 1858, awaiting further orders from the United States Navy. Abe Mitchell Palmer was born in Moosehead, Pennsylvania in 1872. He grew up as a devout and well-educated Quaker. As the Democratic Party member, he served in the House of Representatives between 1900 to 1915. Around the start of the U.S. intervention in World War I, he was appointed alien property custodian before he became Attorney General under Woodrow Wilson in 1919. He used the Espionage Act and the Sedition Act to launch attacks against radicals and aliens. He was even responsible for the deporting of anarchist Emma Goldman and suspects of subversion. The Palmer raids in 1920 were the arrest and capture of suspects of communism. However, his campaign was controversial due to its disregard for the civil liberties of Americans. Palmer did not win the Democratic presidential nomination, though he did continue to be active in the Democratic Party. Lee Harvey Oswald was a former United States Marine born in 1939 in New Orleans, Louisiana. He was also a Marxist who was interested in socialist ideas before joining the Marine Corps. As a Marine, he was an above-average marksman, and after leaving the Marines, he moved to the Soviet Union, where he married Marina Pruvaska in 1961, and a year later returned to the United States with his wife and daughter. Allegedly, he shot Kennedy in 1963 since he was seen holding a rifle on the 6th floor of the building. Additionally, he had fired other shots, one hitting and wounding John B. Coney, a Texas governor, and one shot killing a police officer, J.D. Tippit. He never went to trial since he was killed on his way to county jail by Jack Ruby, who was part of the outraged mob. Even though he was the primary suspect, his death sparked increased conspiracies over the assassination of John F. Kennedy, that other people were also involved in the assassination. What if the Wilmot Proviso was passed? After the Mexican-American War in 1846, Congressman David Wilmot proposed the ban of slavery in newly acquired Mexican territory. His proposal was most likely to be rejected by the Senate if John C. Calhoun and other senators had failed to oppose it after it passed through the House of Representatives. The issue of slavery would escalate immediately, and slave states would have most likely been outraged. Due to slave states having even less representation in both houses of the Congress, once more slave states joined the Union, the slave states would have eventually seceded from the Union. As a victory for opponents of the extension of slavery in new territory, the Free Soil Party would have also emerged to power sooner in the sectional conflict. The slave states seceding would spark a civil war that would end quickly, since the Union would have had increased advantages in population and geography, with more free states on their side. What if the Dawes Act was not passed? The Dawes Act of 1887 ended tribal ownerships of land, therefore turning their land into privately owned land by individuals. This was in an effort to assimilate Native Americans into white society, also to transfer native-owned land to white settlers. Without the Dawes Act, native tribes would be preserved for longer along with their culture. This also means that Native American population would become less weak due to retaining their ancestral lands and customs. Indian reservations would not be created, and the Native Americans would not have been stripped of all tribal land and allocated poor and useless lands. The preservation of tribal ownership would have led to an increased respect and recognition of all of Native American rights, which would prevent further Indian conflicts such as the Wounded Knee Massacre of 1890. The American Indian movement would have also occurred sooner than 1968 and be more powerful and influential. What if George Washington was a monarch? After the Revolutionary War, while the Founding Fathers were setting up the nation, they wanted George Washington to be the first leader of the country. He chose to be an elected individual and run the country democratically. What if, instead, he chose to become a king and a monarch and run the country that way? This would have changed the way our country interacted with the rest of the world. It would have been led to the United States emulating Britain and taking lands forcefully from the Native Americans and the Spanish. The side effects of the United States becoming a monarchy is that other revolutionary wars that actually happened might not have after the United States became a monarchy instead of a democratic republic. The democratic policies that kept the United States in check wouldn't have existed and would have led to the United States empire annexing and conquering lands around the new empire. The United States actively aided Panama, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines to becoming states. If the United States never gave up control and actively developed these areas, the world stage would look a lot different. It would have had more access to countries such as Japan, Korea, and Vietnam. If the United States controlled these territories during major world wars and during the Vietnam and Korean wars, the outcome would have been different for most, if not all, of the wars. World War II would have been drastically different because of the large American presence in the Philippines. American presence would have changed the United States' focus to removing Japan from the war before getting Germany to surrender. The Vietnam and Korean wars would have either not started or have been definitively won by the United States. The acquisition of extra territories would have solidified the United States' position on the world stage also as an imperial power. The Canadian colonies revolted with the 13 colonies during the Revolutionary War. The Canadian provinces, which would have brought the combined number of colonies from 13 to 17, revolted with us, would have been taken much more seriously by the British. The British would have been more threatened by the complete rebellion of the Americas, and would have assigned even more resources to control their imperial holdings. The revolutionary forces would have been even harder pressed to defend their meager holdings. Revolutionary forces would have most likely lost due to the British using more forces and devoting better resources and personnel to the Revolutionary War. The aftermath of the war will lead to more taxes and oppression in the colonies. The revolution failing would have led to other revolutions that were inspired by the Americans. Victory would have never happened, hearing about the brutal defeat and subsequent oppression of the American colonies after the failed revolution.